The gap between a government and individuals is a big one. The government wants to know what people need, and the people want their concerns to be heard. Luckily, the fusion of technology and governance has paved the way for a more efficient, accessible, and responsive public administration, thereby improving public service delivery. With the advent of user-friendly websites and mobile applications and data-driven solutions, administrators around the world are now better equipped to streamline administrative processes, enhance transparency, and provide innovative citizen services. In this episode, we're going to explore how technology and smartphones are helping governments to meet the ever-growing demands of their constituents, creating a more connected and digitally inclusive society for everyone, including the next half billion.
The next half billion, or the NHB, are the core of this podcast. They represent the second big wave of internet users in India, hence the term next. We define them as the cohort of 500 million first-time internet users that have come online via their mobile phones in 5 years. From a demographic standpoint, they are mainly from the bottom 60% of India's income distribution. They are owners of small businesses like beauty salons and kirana shops, and also blue-collar workers, domestic workers, security guards, etc. They are building a greater comfort with tech and represent the hustle and ambition of an aspiring India. I am Utsav, an ex-engineer turned market researcher, traveler, and podcaster.
And I'm Nivedita, an ex-engineer turned comedian and writer. And you're listening to Smartphone Nation, how the next half billion are shaping their future online. In today's episode, we'll tell you how smartphones have made governance and citizen services faster, more efficient, and easier to access. Hey Utsav, have you ever had any interactions with your local authorities like the municipality before?
Not really, but I'm guessing you're asking about this because you have a story.
Yes, I do. When I was in my hometown during the pandemic, our local municipality was very efficient. They asked us to separate our trash into wet and dry waste, but a lot of people didn't know how to do it properly. So the authorities gathered everyone in our building and neighboring houses to give us a demonstration on how to separate our waste. They were actually quite angry with us for not doing it right initially. I don't know of anyone that separates their waste like we do in my building. Everyone is so scared of the guy who yelled at us. We don't even use trash bags. All of our wet waste we throw directly into the wet waste bin downstairs and then wash the bin before we bring it back up. Obviously, all the dry waste and e-waste is also separated and disposed properly.
I think the reason for this is that a lot of times it can be confusing what goes into wet waste and what goes into dry waste. Or sometimes we are just so lazy to do it right. Like the fact that you have to wash all of your containers before throwing it in your dry waste. Most people don't do it.
Now that we're on the topic, do you know how to dispose of tea bags?
That goes into wet waste, right?
Only if they're completely compostable. Some of them aren't, in which case you have to dump only the tea into the wet waste and trash the bag in your dry waste. Also, the little paper tag attached to it has to go into dry waste too. You can also bury your tea leaves or compostable tea bags under your plants to nourish the root and suppress weed growth.
Okay then, whoever this person is has had a huge impact on you.
And my neighbors. It's fair because it's also very important for people to know this. Anyway, I only wanted to highlight how that was the only time I've interacted with the authorities for a shared concern. Otherwise, getting in touch with authorities can be hard and usually something we all try to avoid as much as we can. If only there was a way to solve that.
And that's our cue to get into the thrust of today's episode. Civic administrators all over the world have ways to connect with their people. Governance is a combined effort at the end of the day, and the authorities need the participation of its people to carry out public service delivery effectively. So in the age of social media, where connecting people is becoming so easy, why not use technology to improve public service delivery?
Exactly. Because if citizens don't have a place to raise their concerns today, you bet they'll use Twitter to call you out.
That's true. It's the only reason I have a Twitter account. But India started early enough. E-governance in India traces its roots back to the early 1990s, when the government started exploring the use of information technology to improve service delivery and governance. But it was only in the early 2000s that a more organized approach was taken. India launched the National E-Governance Plan in 2006 with the aim of providing government services to citizens electronically. The plan includes various projects and initiatives to enhance the use of technology in governance, like Digital India.
You know, Singapore has an initiative like this too. You know what it's called?
What?
Smart nation.
No way.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up. But Digital India has been a game changer. I never have cash on me, and nor does anyone else. It's so hard to find change these days because everyone's using UPI or other digital transactions.
Yeah, so it only makes sense that we use this technology to solve for the more pressing problems because we absolutely need it at this time. Listen to Tariq Mustafa, an investor from Omidyar Network India, an impact investment firm with a focus on the next half billion. Talk about why.
We can start in the context of public service delivery in an urban area, right? Like, I think it's well documented that our cities are nowhere near where it's supposed to be, right? Like under 37% of the sewage water is treated. Nearly 60% of the households do not have access to pipe drinking water. I mean, if you think of public transportation, right, that's caters to less than 10% of the trips. We are largely dependent on private vehicles to really commute. 8 of the 10 most polluted cities in the world are in India. We look at any ranking in terms of livability. We have very few cities in the top 100. I'm pretty sure it's pretty next to zero. So and this is not just an urban issue. Like many of similar public service delivery issues, I'm sure exist in rural areas as well. And if we sort of dig down and say, look, who does this really impact? Right, like, and it's really the next half billion that really bears the brunt of it, because many of us who have the money can actually buy private services to actually sort of address some of these issues.
That's spot on. This is why it's so important for us to be mindful, because the elite can afford to get, say, an air purifier to battle poor air quality, but most people can't. For the rich and privileged, the standard of living is good, probably as good as those living in the best cities in the world, because they can afford it. But it isn't the case for the next half billion, who have a combined household income of less than 21,000 rupees on average.
Absolutely. And if we dig deeper to find out why, we'll find many reasons. One is state capacity. Our cities are just not equipped to deliver most of these services. But also, the financial resources or fiscal health of a city really matters. Less than 28% of the expenditure of cities on public services is met through their own revenue. So they are largely dependent on union government grants, so you can't plan or invest long term. The third is how actively do citizens engage with the government, provide feedback. Do we hold them accountable or have challenge to do so? Economic growth is driven by urbanization and the growth of cities. So we need to fix our cities, make them livable for everyone, and be able to do business and make it truly inclusive.
Yes, because it isn't right now. We spoke to Satish, a housekeeping professional, about his experience with getting his grievances addressed, and he told us about a time he got a higher electricity bill. Here's Satish.
The electricity bill for the previous month was a bit higher than usual. So the next day before heading to my office, I went to the electricity bill office and told them that my bill was on the high side. I also mentioned that I had cleared the previous bill. So they made me fill out a form, took my signature, and reduced my bill for the next month after rectifying the mistake.
But Satish has also made use of technology to get his work done. His friend got a PAN card by applying online and helped him get one too.
My friend sent my Aadhaar card and all the required documents from here. Back in the day, those guys used to make us fill out forms, and then we would have to come all the way back to take the PAN card from the office itself. Now it's different. My friend uploaded all my documents online, and then it took only 2 months for the office to process it, and it arrived at my doorstep.
This is the story of many. Most of our documentation now happens online. Even house agreements are made online these days. And urbanization is extending to Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities too. As we progress as a country, they become larger and employment opportunities are moving to these cities. So the need for efficient public service delivery is even more urgent now. And that's where companies like E-Gov come in. E-Gov works in 4 broad areas. First is urban-specific service delivery like property registration, public grievance redressal, birth and death certificates, etc. The second is health, including campaigns like vaccination programs and malaria bed nets, etc. In fact, the digitally signed certificate module that was part of CoWIN was built by E-Gov. The third is public finance and fund flow, and the fourth area is sanitation. We spoke to the Chief Operating Officer of E-Gov, Chandar Muthukrishnan, in more detail about it, and here's what he had to say.
most citizens who live in urban neighborhoods or even rural neighborhoods, they may have a septic tank in their houses, and these tanks periodically get filled up and they find that WC is unusable. And then that's when they frantically call for support to get that septic tank sort of desludged. So what we basically provide is an application that connects citizens with desludging operators, with the government department, and a fecal sludge treatment plant. So we connect these various players and we ensure that the sludge is picked up from the septic tank in the citizen premises, taken to the fecal sludge treatment plant, and responsibly disposed.
Earlier, residents of a particular area would call their local private agency. They would charge money, they take the sludge and dump it in a riverbed or in open land. That would lead to contamination of groundwater, leading to mosquito infestations and health problems like diarrhea and cholera. India still has a lot of deaths due to diarrhea and cholera. Over 5 years up to 2017, waterborne diseases, cholera, diarrhea, typhoid, and viral hepatitis caused 10,738 deaths, as the government data shows. And human feces are the only feces that contains bacteria that can harm people. Animal feces can't. So how does E-Gov make sure it is disposed of responsibly? Here's Chandar again explaining that.
So what we're doing in sanitation is essentially an application that connects a citizen, allows them to consume our desludging service from the local government, and the local government then assigns a desludging operator who goes, collects it, takes it to a fecal sludge treatment plant, and responsibly disposes it off. And then we also allow the FSTP to now record specific treatment quality metrics like, what is the, parts per million of solid particulate matter in the final level of sulfur, level of phosphorus, a number of other parameters that typically are required to make sure the water is of a sufficiently clean quality to be dumped back into a water body or the soil.
But the digital divide is real, and not everyone is equipped to use technology like we'd expect. People now know how to use phones, so that's where we have made a breakthrough in general. But E-Gov helps people overcome their fear of technology beyond that. They help them move from the phone to the browser and say, hey, look, it's the same thing. It makes the whole process less intimidating. Chandra has an interesting story to explain how this helps people who work in last mile delivery.
This lady in Odisha, so we were rolling out the FSM, the fecal sludge management application in Odisha. And this lady was actually part of a self-help group working in one of the cities in the FSTP. So what happens in an FSM supply chain is, a citizen raises a request, the ULB assigns it to a desludging operator. The operator goes, picks up sludge, completes the sludge pickup into a truck. Truck goes to the FSTP and dumps the sludge in the FSTP tank, and the FSTP operator records that, it's been so many liters of fluid, of sludge has come in and all of that. So this lady had to use our app on her smartphone. So she didn't have a smartphone, so she got supplied a smartphone as part of the operation. So she initially had some apprehension, but then she learned to use the app and she was conversant, and she takes the phone home. And she was telling us the next time we visited that the respect that her family had for her in-laws, her children, the respect that they had for her increased several-fold because she was using a smartphone, right? So she said, I was feeling very good about myself for the first time. I've been getting all kinds of flack from my family, and now my family sees me with a new light saying, oh, you're using a smartphone for work. That's so great. That's so cool.
That's heartwarming. More power to working women gaining respect in their families. But tech is still intimidating to a large part of the population, and it's important to earn the trust of the people so they won't write off useful technology. We will get to that, but right after this short break. Welcome back to Smartphone Nation. While we've now digitized most of these services, a lot of people in our country still don't have smartphones. They can make a phone call if they have a feature phone and get their concerns addressed in that old school way. But what about the people that don't even have a feature phone? They have to physically go to city offices and lose a lot of time in the process. Also, a lot of them are daily wagers, and losing an entire day could mean losing out on an entire day's wage, trying to avail a government benefit. Governments took notice of this. Here's Chandar again telling us what local administrative bodies are doing about that.
there is no easy way to solve this. And one of the ways that governments are solving this is to make use of intermediaries. And the intermediary could be a youth volunteer in your neighborhood that you trust. And that youth volunteer is comfortable using technology, and this person can work with them and use the app that youth has. And on the citizens' behalf, the youth can sort of fill in stuff and then consume that service, right? That's one way to do it. The second is there are government programs where governments like AP and Kerala are some of examples of states that have implemented a volunteers program. So AP calls them Gram Sachivalaya and Ward Sachivalaya, GSWS. So there are these ward secretaries. I think there are about 1 lakh of them across the state. And they get paid an honorary stipend per month to help their fellow community citizen. And what they do is, these are tech-savvy people with laptops, and they go to the citizens who have they are in the community. Citizen goes to them saying, can you help me, get this? And then he says, okay, sure, come. And then he fills it out for them, and he follows through, gives them a printout when it's done and things like that. And that's worked really well. And during COVID, the government actually used the ward secretaries to actually spread COVID guidelines for better health and things like that.
While people are benefiting from digitization, government employees are also saving so much time through the use of technology. E-Gov is able to do this with their open source, good governance technology platform called Digit. Here's Tariq telling us about that.
E-Gov Foundation, the way I think of it, and the product Digit, is really the digital rails for our city, right? It is your sort of your operating system or your digital stack, which automates, streamlines a lot of the municipal operations, a lot of the processes. So that is one aspect. And the second, they have something called the M-Seva app that they have in different states that allows citizens to, get a license, apply for a water connection, pay a bill, sort of file a grievance on the application, right? And without ever having to go and stand in a government line. In Andhra Pradesh, municipal staff reported dramatic increases in their ability to serve a citizen request. And they saved 19 hours per week because of simplified and redesigned workflow. So time that they would have spent taking one paper to the other, getting one thing signed, trying to locate everything, these administrative work, right? 19 hours you save in a week. That's almost a couple of days, like more than a couple of days given back, right? And that sort of releases, one is you don't have to do the painful, boring work, but more importantly, gives you another couple of days to go out and serve the citizens that the employees and government staff wants to serve.
These services enhance your access to the government, especially for vulnerable groups. This can help avoid discrimination and intimidation. Listen to Tariq talk about a case explaining how this can help.
For example, members of the trans community vocalize their preference for a digital interface when interacting with the state, as otherwise they might face discrimination, right? So I'm interacting with an app which doesn't discriminate as against going to a state government office where I might be, right? This was the case with migrants as well, right? A digital interface, if it's effectively and easily available to them, would provide what they thought was a protective layer of invisibility between them and the state. So you can intermediate just as citizens without any of the biases that come.
The digital transformation in India has been tremendously successful in many ways. And with the help of intermediaries, companies like E-Gov are able to serve the next 500 million as well, making service delivery more inclusive. Clearly, there is so much to look forward to in this space, and there is scope for so much growth as well. Here's Tariq again telling us why his organization, Omidyar Network India, decided to invest in E-Gov.
This is one of the cases where we've actually invested 2-3 times, and we actually went back to the first memo we wrote, and we actually put it out in our blog, and we took a screenshot of our internal memo and put it out there. Because it's one of those rare cases where the thesis has played out exactly the way that you would imagine, right? And at a pace and scale that we wouldn't have imagined, right? At that point of time, right? When we first came into E-Gov, I think in 2016, 2017, right? And at that point of time, they were, and let me look at the number, they were at about, 200, 300 odd city, right? And at that point of time, they were going from city to city or state to state to cell. From there, in the next 3-4 years, what E-Gov did was they open sourced their platform. They built built a strong partnership with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. And then it became a national platform, and then it immediately scaled to about 2,500 odd cities, right? Within 2-3 year period of time. So, but to answer your question specifically, what was the thesis? That was the thesis. The thesis was that it will streamline operations and get citizens to access services on their mobile phones. I think the thesis has played out. The pace of scale was a bit unprecedented, and that's been phenomenal. On its own, might not solve for everything in this country, and maybe that's not even an ideal vision to have, right? Given that people continue to have issues navigating digital devices, it takes time for you to build a trust with any sort of pathway of transaction, any process, right? And therefore, I think what we learned through it was also what my colleague Kriti calls offline architectures, right? You need to invest in digital channels as well, right? Like you need to, because a lot of your urban poor and the next half billion actually depends on community organizations, non-profit, the local leaders to actually navigate. So instead of me using the E-Gov app, I go to my trusted local leader to tell them, hey, I have this complaint, can you find? So that individual takes up the phone and files a grievance. So the important thing is to imagine a world with a suite of offline intermediaries that will actually help you engage with tech, right? So it's important to invest in that layer as well, right? Whether it's non-profits, whether it's it's what many people call a tech sati, right? Like many people who come online over the last 4-5 years, right? Like they always had a family member, a neighbor, someone setting up their UPI account for the first time, someone teaching them how to use WhatsApp, right? You need that individual to start helping you trust a digital transaction. So we need to invest in that sort of social, sort of offline intermediaries as well.
With technology and intermediaries to help with it, the future of governance is definitely looking bright. People are becoming more confident in holding authorities accountable with the access they now have, and the authorities are more equipped to carry out the job better and faster. Yet another challenge being solved by the smartphone.
Thank you for tuning into Smartphone Nation. I'm Utsav.
And I am Nivedita. This was Smartphone Nation. Tune in next week for another story on how the next 500 million are shaping their future online. If you like our show, please subscribe to the Smartphone Nation YouTube channel. Don't forget to rate and review us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Share this episode with your friends as it helps the show reach more people.
You can listen and subscribe to Smartphone Nation on the IVM Podcasts app or wherever you get your podcasts. This podcast is also available in Hindi and Tamil. A special thanks to Omidyar Network India for making this season possible. To know how ONI is partnering with bold and purpose-driven entrepreneurs who are working to improve the lives of India's next 500 million, visit omidyarnetwork.in. Tell us what you think of the show. You can find our hosts on Twitter and Instagram. Utsav can be found on the Instagram ID at YWTravel42. You can reach out to Nivedita on Instagram at niv.prakasam. You can follow IVM on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at the ID at IVM Podcasts.
IVM